They didn't need to say it out loud. I knew I didn't belong. I never cared much for loud music, watered-down cocktails, or standing around pretending to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. That's not who I am. But in the modern office world, skipping the annual holiday party is apparently a crime against corporate culture. So, when I declined the invitation to our company's blowout bash at some overpriced rooftop bar downtown, I thought I was making a harmless personal choice. I didn't realize it would become a thing. I mean, who doesn't come to the holiday party? One of the 20-something marketing guys scoffed as I walked past his desk the next morning. His voice wasn't low. He wanted me to hear it. Another chimed in. Maybe she's busy knitting sweaters for her cat's laughter. I kept walking. I always kept walking. At 46, I was the quiet one in the room, the dependable one, the one who remembered birthdays and brought extra pens to meetings. I wasn't flashy. I didn't schmooze. I just did my job, and I did it well. But being good at your job doesn't win you popularity points. In a workplace obsessed with open-plan energy and bottomless mimosas, I wasn't part of their circle, and that made me invisible until they wanted to make me the joke. Later that day, during lunch, I opened our office chat app to check the calendar, and that's when I saw it. Someone had posted a meme in the Team Fun channel. It was a photo of a grumpy old lady sitting alone on a bench, arms crossed with the caption "Dana at home during the party," like, "Fun is for the weak." More laughing emojis than I could count, even a gif of someone knitting furiously. And then came the worst part. My manager Rebecca commented, "Haha, stop. You guys are terrible." No one defended me. No one said it was inappropriate. They didn't even think twice. Just a harmless joke, right? I stared at the screen for a long time, the heat rising to my face, my hands frozen above the keyboard. My heart was pounding, like I'd just run a mile. I wanted to say something, to type a witty comeback, to ask how this was remotely okay, in a professional environment. But I didn't. I just closed the laptop. On the outside, I smiled through the rest of the day like nothing happened. I answered emails. I booked conference rooms. I even reminded the same people who mocked me about their upcoming deadlines. But inside, something shifted. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like the odd one out. Not just in this job, but in every job I'd had. I was always too quiet, too reserved, too serious, as if being thoughtful and disciplined was some kind of defect. But I'd never been humiliated like this before. Not publicly, not with management's approval, and not in a space where professionalism was supposed to matter. That night, I sat alone in my apartment stirring a cup of tea that had long gone cold. My mother used to say, "Dignity doesn't always roar. It sometimes walks away and works in silence." So that's what I did. I pulled out a dusty notebook from my drawer. It was something I'd started months ago, but never had the courage to pursue ideas, observation solutions to office dynamics, notes about transparency, inclusion, and tools. I wished existed for people like me, people who just wanted to work, grow, and be treated with decency. I wrote until midnight. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of a very different chapter of my life. The day they laughed at me for not being fun enough would one day become the day I started building something greater than their approval. And they had no idea what was coming. A month after the holiday party incident, I got the company-wide email. The subject line read, "New project lead announced, big things ahead." I knew what it was before I clicked. I had applied for that role 2 weeks earlier. Project lead for our newest client integration initiative. It was exactly in my wheelhouse. I'd been managing back-end logistics for over a decade, streamlining processes others didn't even notice needed fixing. Quiet work, invisible work, but foundational. I had put everything into that application. A cover letter so meticulous, I revised it 10 times. I even volunteered to lead the prep calls for the client during the evaluation period, hoping they'd see how ready I was. I thought foolishly that results would speak louder than popularity, but when I opened the email, my stomach dropped. It wasn't me. It was Kyle with his 3 years of experience, slick hair, and endless supply of overconfidence. Kyle, who once asked me what a milestone tracker was. Kyle, who regularly left meetings early for networking happy hours. They gave it to him, and then came the part that truly broke something inside me. Rebecca, my manager, called me into her office later that day. She smiled that overly polished corporate smile. "Dana, I just wanted to say thank you for applying. You're such a valuable part of the team." I nodded, waiting for some explanation, some reason why Kyle got the job over me. But we just felt Kyle brought her fresher energy to the role. She said, "You're so dependable in your current position, and honestly, we can't afford to lose you there." There it was. I was too good at being beneath them. I wasn't being promoted because they needed me to stay invisible. Quiet, reliable background support. And then she added, like a cherry on top, "I'd love for you to mentor Kyle, though. Show him the ropes. You've got such great instincts. Mentor him. Teach him the very job that should have been mine." I nodded again, slowly, because I didn't trust myself to speak. I walked out of her office, feeling like I'd just been erased. Again. That night, I went home and sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine and my notebook. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just wrote. I wrote about how companies praise diversity and inclusion, but reward charm over competence. I wrote about the way women like me, quiet, experienced, older, are asked to train the very people promoted over us. And somewhere between the second glass of wine and a page full of scribbled diagrams, an idea started forming. What if there was a tool that tracked real contributions, not just presentations and buzzwords, but actual productivity? What if performance metrics were built around impact, not noise? I stayed up until 3 a.m., sketching out workflows, naming features, even drafting a name, ClearPath software that sees the people no one else does. I didn't have a background in software development, but I knew systems. I knew what companies overlooked. I knew what people like me needed to be seen. Over the next few weeks, I started using my evenings to study basic coding principles. I watched webinars. I joined quiet online forums for women in tech. I found developers who freelance designers who wanted to build meaningful projects, all while still showing up to work every day. Mentoring Kyle, watching him stumble through tasks I used to do in my sleep. He never thanked me. Not once, but I didn't need his gratitude. I had a new focus now. I wasn't trying to climb their ladder anymore. I was building my own, and they still didn't see it coming. It was a Tuesday, rainy. The kind of cold that soaks into your bones. I had just finished leading Kyle's morning check-in for the third time that week, because apparently team lead meant Ask Dana. I was reviewing a vendor compliance sheet when I saw the calendar invite pop up one-on-one with HR, 11:15 a.m. No subject, no explanation. I just knew. When I walked into the HR office, I didn't see Rebecca, just Janet from HR sitting beside a man I'd never met before, with a thin folder in front of him, and the soft expression people wear when they're about to hand you something you didn't ask for. "Dana, thank you for coming in," Janet said. "As you know, the company's been evaluating department structure, and unfortunately, your role has been selected for redundancy. Like I was a file that could be archived. They handed me a packet severance terms, 2 weeks of pay, health coverage through the end of the month, and a smile that suggested I should be grateful. No mention of the 12 years I'd given them. No exit interview. No farewell. I walked out with a white box filled with the remnants of my desk, a framed picture of my parents, a coffee mug that said, "Introverts do it quietly," and a jar of pens that no one ever returned. No one said goodbye, not even Kyle. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I got into my car, pulled the door shut, and sat motionless. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt done. Done being overlooked. Done being the reliable background character in someone else's spotlight. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at the folder I'd saved months ago. ClearPath Sour Prototype. The idea had been brewing quietly for too long. Now I had nothing in my way. No more excuses, no corporate leash, no fear of what might happen if I failed. I had already lost what I feared most. I had nothing to prove to anyone but myself. So I got to work. The next 6 months were brutal. I spent mornings researching startup grants and evenings emailing every developer I could find on freelance platforms. I lived on black coffee and frozen pasta. I taught myself just enough UI design to pitch my vision, then hired a college grad to bring it to life. I applied for a Women in Tech Accelerator program. Got rejected, then I applied again. Rejected again. On the third try, I landed a Zoom interview with a panel of women entrepreneurs. They asked me why I wanted to build ClearPath. I told them the truth. I was the woman who kept everything running, who trained the new guy that got promoted over me, who sat through meetings where jokes were made at my expense. No one saw me, until they wanted something from me. I'm building ClearPath for the people like me. The quiet ones, the ones who get passed over, not because they're not good, but because they don't shout. They sat in silence for a moment. Then one of them, Jennifer Maxwell, a CEO I had admired for years, leaned forward and said, "Let's help you build this." That was the beginning. With their backing, we built a beta. I reached out to companies I knew needed help retaining talent. ClearPath started gaining traction first locally, then nationally. By year 2, we were onboarding our 50th client. By year 3, I got a call from a struggling mid-size firm looking to restructure their people operations, the same firm that laid me off. And they had no idea I was the founder behind the product. They were now desperate to license. I scheduled the call personally because I had one more chapter to write. 3 years after they let me go, I sat in the executive conference room of the very company that once called me redundant. It looked the same stale coffee smell, same dusty ficus plant in the corner, same cracked leather chairs. But everything felt different, because this time, I was at the head of the table. The company had been bleeding talent for over a year. After multiple lawsuits tied to workplace discrimination and several failed leadership transitions, they were desperate enough to license ClearPath, the very software I had built from the ashes of my dismissal. What they didn't realize was that ClearPath's new parent company, my company, had just acquired majority ownership in a quiet buyout last quarter. They needed a savior, and I had just become their CEO. When the leadership team filed into the room, they looked tired, nervous. A few glanced at me doing double takes. Most hadn't made the connection yet. Then Rebecca walked in. Older, a little thinner, still wearing the same forced smile she'd used the day she told me I wasn't a good fit for leadership. Her eyes met mine, and that smile faltered. She recognized me. "Dana," she said like she wasn't sure I was real. "Hello, Rebecca," I replied, calm and cool. She stood frozen for a moment. I didn't realize you were part of this transition." "I'm not part of it," I said, folding my hands. "I lead it." Silence. I could feel the air shift in the room as realization settled. I waited, let them sit with it. Then I opened the meeting. "I want to thank you all for being here today. This company is entering a new chapter, one focused on merit, accountability, and dignity, not popularity contests, not favoritism, and certainly not mockery." Several faces turned red. Rebecca looked like she might sink into her chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the win wasn't just in being back. The win was in being able to walk into the room, look at the people who underestimated me, and feel absolutely nothing. No bitterness, no vengeance, just clarity. I presented ClearPath's rollout plan, discussed staff reorganization, outlined our expectations for leadership accountability. Every word I spoke was heard, because now they had no choice but to listen. After the meeting, Rebecca approached me alone in the hallway. "I never expected this," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "Neither did I. But here we are. I know we didn't treat you well," she admitted. "You didn't deserve that." I nodded. You're right. I didn't. But I'm not here to settle old scores. I'm here to build something better. She looked relieved and maybe a little ashamed. Will you be attending the next company party? She asked. Trying to lighten the moment, I smiled. Just a little. No, I said I have work to do. I walked away, not out of anger, but because I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built something of my own. I had reclaimed my voice. I had turned their laughter into fuel and used it to light my own path. That night, I stood in my home office, overlooking the city, glass of wine in hand, watching the lights flicker like stars. I thought about every setback, every snide remark, every door that closed, and I whispered, to no one in particular, thank you for underestimating me.